Hi there, it's Scott Dikkers of How to Write Funny, Funny University. Thanks for checking out this video. I'm going to give you best tips, best practices, and some insider info on how to ace any comedy job submission, a job for comedy writing. So for decades, I've been reviewing submissions from comedy writers, and I've been hiring people. And just recently, I put out a word that I was hiring for a book project. I want to put together a little team to write some comedy books and submit those to publishers and get started on that project. And so I went through this process anew and saw a lot of submissions. I saw about, I would say, 100 different submissions. And I sent out pretty explicit instructions. And this is part of my first tip. So most submissions, so I could probably just remove 50% of those 100 submissions I got because they didn't follow the instructions. So simple first tip, read the instructions carefully. If you're submitting to anywhere established, they're going to have some sort of requirements for what to submit. It can be a little tricky to do exactly what they ask to the letter. You kind of need to know where to push it a little bit, and I'll give you tips on that. But the big problem most people have is they just don't listen to the instructions at all. They don't review the submission requirements, or they seemingly forgot them and are just kind of doing their own thing. So my submission requirements were pretty simple. I wanted 10 book title ideas, and I gave a few examples of subject matter that I wanted covered for the book. Gave a few, these are going to be books that are going to be either political or pop culture type celebrity profiles, similar to my Elon Musk book that I put out a couple years ago, and then the Donald Trump book that I put out a couple years before that. So the people who sent me 10 submissions of book title ideas that focused on those types of people were in the top one half. The other half didn't give me 10, or the subject matter was a little, not quite on point in terms of politics or pop culture, or they weren't book titles. They were like jokes for the inside of the book. Some of them not too bad, but that's not what I asked for. So I was really looking for book titles. And so number one, read the instructions, read the submission requirements, and try to abide by them. Number two, super easy one, probably goes without saying, make it good. Okay, so there's an even smaller percentage of submissions to any comedy job that are good. And what do I mean by good? Well, it has to do with how you approach the work. So on rare occasion, there's somebody who's just a comedy genius, and they can sit alone in their house and write 10 really funny ideas and send them out and get plucked up for a plum comedy writing job. It's rare, but it does happen. That's like 1 in 500 people are going to be like that. So if you're not one of those people, which most of us are not, the way you can make sure that your submission is good is 3 things. Number one, get experience. Do comedy. Do it on your own. Do it for free. Start your own blog. Submit comedy articles a lot. Write funny tweets. Do whatever you can to keep writing, keep working, because the more you write, the more you work, the better and the funnier you're going to get. Okay, that's number one. Number two, use the best practices. So you can go to howtowritefunny.com. You can download free ebooks and read some articles to get the best practices for how to write comedy. There is a right way and a wrong way to do it and to make it funny. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel and flounder around trying to do something funny when there's a clear system for writing comedy that all comedy abides by. It's not a formula, it's a system. So it can adapt to any format, You can be incredibly original within that system. It's not a rigid formula that dictates what kind of jokes you can tell or how the timing works, anything like that. It's a system for how to turn an idea into a funny idea and to execute it in the best possible way. Anybody hiring for a comedy job is going to want to know that you know that language of professional comedy and are adept with it. So that's easy to learn, it's free to learn, and there's no excuse not to do that. All right, number 3, super important. You got to get feedback on the work. Again, 1 in 500 is going to be able to write 10 ideas alone in their house and send them out and have them be good. The rest of us have to show those ideas to other people and get some feedback. And we don't just write 10 ideas. We're going to write 50 to 100 ideas. And we're going to whittle them down by asking people, hey, what do you think? Posting them on places like the How to Write Funny Facebook group, where people will give you feedback on your jokes. You can put them up as a poll and people will vote on them. And it's extremely helpful in zeroing in on which of your ideas are getting the best audience response. Those are the ideas you're going to want to go with. So combination of those 3 things, you're going to be sitting really pretty in terms of the quality of your submission. Because at the end of the day, there are some other factors, but almost all the other factors don't matter as much as how good and how funny is the submission. It almost doesn't matter like how nice you are, how timely you are, how neat you are, how many typos you have. If it's funny, almost everything else will be excused, because finding a submission that's really funny is rare. It's super rare. I would say in my roughly 20 years at The Onion, I probably saw 1,000 submissions. I can count on one hand the number of submissions I saw that were like, oh my God, that's so funny. We have to hire that person. Typically, how I would hire people at The Onion is I would seek them out. I would find them, or I would encounter someone in real life who was being funny, and I would offer them a job, and then I would train them, and they'd come in, and maybe they'd be a little green at first, but I would train them and get them experience, get them practicing, so that they could get up to speed and learn the craft of comedy. It's rare that somebody just has it. It's rare that they develop it on their own. But again, like I'm saying before about one of the 3 things you can do to make sure your comedy writing is good is to practice it. Keep doing it a lot. That gives you a leg up and can actually potentially make you one of those 1 in 1,000 people who can just kind of nail it because you just know it. All right, so another tip, I'll move right on to a couple more tips for how to ace a submission. We've talked about how to be in the top 50%, and then how to be in the top, I would say 5%, by just being really good. Another thing you can do to give yourself a leg up, and this is a little tricky, but it never hurts. And the reason, I'll explain why it's a little tricky. Throw in a couple, 3 extra jokes. If you're submitting, say, 10 jokes. There's no harm in demonstrating that you are prolific. That's a good thing. Whoever's hiring you wants to know you're prolific and you're going to be a wealth of ideas. You can go overboard with this. If somebody asks for 10 ideas and you send 50, that's a little overkill. But if you send 3 or 4 more, that's a really good sign that you're a hard worker, you're going to over-deliver, and you're inexhaustible, which is exactly the feeling that you want to communicate to someone. No one wants to take a chance on you if you're lazy or you're only going to do the bare minimum amount of work. So that's a rare thing too. I'd say that's in the similar range. About 5% of submissions will add a couple more extra jokes to the submission pile to demonstrate that wonderful quality of just being inexhaustible. All right. One other thing, minor, but it is a factor. Make your submission accessible. Make it easy to read. So some people will send an attachment in an email. They'll send a Google Doc. Sometimes I even get attachments that are in formats that I've never heard of. And I have to Google, how am I supposed to decipher a .xml file? I know how to open one of those, but just an example. don't send anything in a bulky, inaccessible, hard to access format. It's always better to put it in the body of an email, because you open the email, it's boom, it's right there, you can't miss it. And that makes it really easy. Somebody reviewing submissions for any kind of comedy is looking at a lot of them, and they don't need to work hard. They don't make them jump through hoops just to get at your submission. Part of that is proofreading it. Make sure it's laid out well, it's organized well. These are all good indicators that you're going to be easy to work with, nice to work with, convenient to work with. You're not going to cause any trouble. You're not going to be a headache. You're not going to be high maintenance. Make everything laid out nice, bold your headers, that sort of stuff. Make it really neat and really clean, and make it easy to read by putting it in the body of the email. Another thing I like personally is I like when the ideas are numbered, because then if I'm giving feedback, I can say, hey, number 6 is really good. That's a lot easier to say than, oh, the idea about the dancing bear who has alcoholism was a good idea. Much rather type the number 6. All right, and then finally, one of the persistent myths in comedy, or really any kind of entertainment, is that you have to know somebody and you have to have a personal connection. My personal experience is that that's not quite as helpful as people think, but I should qualify that by saying, in my personal experience, I always hired based on merit, and I never hired based on whether I knew somebody. However, it can get your submission looked at. It can get your foot in the door. So if you are one of those super funny people and you followed all the other rules, it does give you a little bit of a leg up to know someone. Okay, so how do you know someone? Well, you have to be a part of the comedy community. You have to go to comedy events. You have to be present for anything happening online having to do with comedy. You have to be an active and engaged participant in the comedy community so that you're a known quantity. You can develop a good reputation. Those things are all really valuable, because if you get a blind submission from someone you've never heard of, it might be a little risky to just immediately hire that person, go into business with them when you don't know who they are, how flaky they are, you don't know anything about them. That provides a little bit more security to the person hiring you. If your submission is terrible, if you haven't made it accessible, if you have done the bare minimum ideas, et cetera, knowing someone is not going to help. Okay, you're not going to be able to get anywhere on pure nepotism. But if you followed all those other tips and you've got an absolutely great submission, knowing someone can cinch the deal, and it can really be helpful. So you can also reach out to people on Twitter or wherever else and just make their acquaintance. If somebody's performing at a comedy club, you can meet them and tell them you love their work. There's so many ways to make a connection and be a part of the comedy community so that you can have that connection, so that when your submission comes up for review, they know you and you're a known quantity and you're not a mystery. So those are my tips. And I did end up hiring out of the 100. I made an offer to, I would say, about 10 people to be on the team. So the people who were in that top 5% were aces. It was almost a surefire that they were going to get hired for that. And, they were all just super funny. And they all kind of checked off these, the numbered items on this list to get this job. So in the last couple of minutes here, anybody watching wants to ask a question, follow up on anything I talked about, clarification of anything, happy to take that. These videos usually get more views after they're live, and I'll certainly be checking in and answering comments then. But if anybody has one now, I'm happy to entertain it. But I'm not going to sit here in silence. That would be awkward. So in the meanwhile, I will say, again, thank you for watching. For more videos, you can subscribe to the How to Write Funny YouTube channel. Again, you can go to howtowritefunny.com. You can also get there by going to funny-university.com. And again, there are free resources there for comedy writers to improve their comedy. And you can join the How to Write Funny Facebook group for more tips on how to improve your comedy. I'll put notices up there, and also you can get great feedback on your work in the How to Write Funny Facebook group. And with that, no questions. That's great. That means I said everything I need to say. You guys got it. wonderful. And I will wish you all a good day and a good evening. And thanks again for joining me. Take care.